Hello there, and welcome back to the first episode of the Team Draft Super League. We got the chance to watch Reed Duke draft, and he was passing to Sam Black. And interestingly, we're going to get to see those two battle it out. I'm joined now by Justin Cohen. Justin, welcome to the broadcast. It's nice to see you.
Nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so this is going to be fun. I've roped you into the booth finally, and you and I get to do a round of commentary. I'm looking forward to it. How did the draft go? What did you have any thoughts on how things went?
It was interesting. My draft was kind of one direction in that I started with a bunch of stuff that required you to have creatures and spent the entire draft scrambling to find creatures, of which there were very few to be found. Seems like they were being taken extremely aggressively, and that was kind of the tone of the draft. I ended up pretty much taking only cards of one color. It seemed like I got most of it, but I'm pretty nervous about what the other team managed to get while I was doing that.
Yeah, how does that work? Like, let's say you're going into the third pack and you have a deficiency in your deck of some sort, right? Like you're low on creature count, or you're screwed on your colors, and you really need to just okay, I just need to take anything that's this color so I can make playables. How do you balance that out against not letting good cards go by potentially to your opponents?
Yeah, I mean, it's really tough. You got to make an evaluation of how much can sometimes you get in spots where your deck's largely, you have to make a call of, can you save match wins with this deck? At some point in team drafts, you kind of have to bail a little bit on your deck and just be like, all right, I can't even get past one match win with this deck almost no matter what comes. And I'm going to lean more on trying to take whatever I know the table is short and hurt the people I'm passing to. But in my spot, I was short very early from creatures. I just had a bunch of creature enhancers right away. And so it was the whole course of the draft. I was just trying to get more creatures. And the nice thing about staying one color like I was I was ready. As it happened, nothing really opened up, but I was ready to jump in on anything that was open for a second color that would provide me creatures. Anywhere creatures were coming from, I would have taken them. As it happened, most of them were in the color I was already taking.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah. I always find that part really interesting because that is where it's so much different than a normal 8-person draft, where it's really just about you. And if you need to, pass some cards that you normally would prefer to take over a creature in that scenario, you'll do it just to make sure your deck has what it needs. But here, there does seem to be a tipping point when it comes to, okay, this isn't salvageable anymore, so I'm just going to do as much damage as I can. And then, you can be the hero who comes away with a match win, from a deck that didn't really deserve it.
Yeah, there's a lot of tension, though, like you pointed out, because the damage that you do could just as easily be getting past one seat down if your opponents have positioned themselves well, and you can end up just destroying your teammate. So you really need to be careful, and there's a lot of risk. This is what makes this format so great and interesting.
Yeah, you're on Team Madison. Do you guys do a lot of team drafting in Madison? I know the draft camps are focused on, getting people prepared for GPs, which I'm assuming wouldn't include a lot of that. But do you find a lot of time for team drafts, or how does that go?
Team drafts, yes, but actual team drafts like this, old school 3v3 team drafts, we don't actually do the way we do because, like you mentioned, the GP and the PT testing is what dominates all of our focus. We do team drafting, but we do teams after. We usually do 8-man pods, and we decide the teams randomly after the draft has occurred to more accurately simulate the pro or GP experience where you don't hate draft from people because they might end up on your team. So there's no incentive for that. So but the old school 3v3 where the people next to you are enemies, we do almost none of that anymore. I'm glad to get the opportunity to do it again.
Yeah, that's how we do it on coverage as well, because, again, it's the same thing. We're trying to build our knowledge base for when we're in the booth to watch you guys draft at GPs and at the Pro Tour. And this is a little different. This is a little different skill set, as it turns out. But this one has, Ben said, he's like, I'm not going to say it's twice as good as an 8-person draft. He's like, but I will say it's 10 times as good.
So it's certainly at least twice as hard.
Yes, definitely. And did you find that when you do these drafts, because, again, they don't pop up quite as often as they used to, that it's difficult for you to manage all the things that are going on?
Oh, yeah. And I mean, a 6-man to begin with is harder because you're dealing with, especially if you're just used to 8-mans, smaller card pool means there's just less to go around. Decks are a little bit worse, and you have to be able to account for that. So you're making more with less while being interfered with and trying to cast interference. So yeah, it's just the difficulty just explodes.
Yeah, expectations management, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm having to do a lot of that as I am going to be playing in this league, of course, against, you know, powerhouse teams like your team and the one we're watching here, Peach Garden Oath and stuff like that, of trying to make sure that I keep my head, you know, because I'm the type of player that wants to win, right? I'm not going to show up and be like, oh, we suck, we're going to lose. Like we're going to try as hard as we can, but at the same time, you know, we went over some of the teams leading in, and of course we did a deeper dive on you guys, and it's just like, what is going on? Like, why did I sign up for this? You know, it's like we're such a distant last in it, but I'm really excited because I have had a chance to do some of these. I call them the same thing you do, these old school 3v3s. You know, because they're not as popular as they once used to be out on the Pro Tour, but I think I've only done 5 or 6 in my whole life. Like, it's just not part of my, you know, routine. I draft primarily on Magic Online, and like I said, with the coverage team, we do the same types that you do, which are the, you know, the random teams after. By the way, it looks like our players are getting set up right now. We should be down there shortly to actually watch them play, and we're going to watch Sam Black play against Reed Duke. Now, you had a chance to, I mean, assuming you guys got on Skype and or maybe you guys are in the same room or whatever, and were able to talk to each other after the draft was over about how to deck build and stuff. How did that go for you guys?
Yeah, Sam and I are in the same house, so we were able to just talk to each other. It was, honestly, there wasn't a lot to it on my end because I had drafted a monocolor deck and I was playing the cards of the color that I could play. And Sam had a bit of a rougher time of it, so he was limited in option quality wise. He was playing, you know, all of the cards that you don't know you're going to regret afterwards.
Yeah, we did see that. It's interesting to note. You know, I was talking to Ben about it on sort of what's acceptable, you know, because we noticed, at least, I don't know if it was the final build, but we did get a chance to pop in on Sam's deck build while he was going down this stretch. And, you know, he looked pretty short on creatures. You know, I only saw 9 of them in there. And, you know, that's a problem, right? I mean, that's something that you have to do. And I was talking to Ben about, well, you know, we were talking about how sometimes you have to play 3 colors, or you have to play a bunch of cyclers or colorless cards that you don't really want to, just to get up to playables. And I asked him, you know, how big of a problem that was in his perspective. And I wanted to know, what about for you? Like, are you worried about that from Sam's perspective, about his creature count being relatively low?
I am, to some extent. Although I will say this, as far as the element that you're talking about, where there's fewer cards, you're being interfered with, you end up with a lot less. As far as who I'd, you know, want to have on my team, drafting under, you know, higher amounts of like progressively higher constraints and all these different stipulations, there's nobody I'd rather have than Sam. He's very good at going outside the box and finding ways to make things work that should not work. Nobody else would even attempt, and then he makes it sing. I'm not saying this is necessarily an example of that, but you know, his range is wider than anyone's.
I have played a few, you know, side drafts against Sam, and he has beaten me senseless with some of the worst. I'm just like, how did this happen? Like, how did he find a line in this game to beat me with this stupid card? And you know, the thing about Sam that's always really impressed me, he does it with such confidence. You know, he just plays this awful. I know he knows it's awful. I know it's awful, and he just goes this and just looks at you like as if it were a glory bringer, you know, and then kills you with it and just scoops up his card like nothing happened. And I'm just sitting there like, how did you? Yeah. I think, you know, that's a skill, by the way, that really shines in this type of environment. And Ben brought that up about Luis as well, who's also somebody who's really good. You know, you'd almost think he tries drafting bad cards just to see if he can get good with them. But I agree. I think Sam has one of the widest ranges I've ever seen for a limited player about being able to accept cards. You know, it's easy to fall into the trap of saying that's unplayable. I don't see it anymore. Right. It's just not on my radar. And especially when you've already practiced them, and you guys practice for GP and then approach her afterwards with a completely different set of constraints. Right. And having an open mind now, it's such a big advantage. I think both you and Sam are both really good at that. All right. The players are ready. Justin, let's head down to the feature match area for Sam Black versus Reed Duke.
Let's do it.
And welcome back to coverage of the Team Draft Super League. I'm Marshall Sutcliffe in the virtual booth with Justin Cohen, and we are ready for our first match ever, Sam Black versus Reed Duke. It is worth noting here, for those of you watching not live, that Reed Duke was passing to Sam Black. So Sam was directly on Reed's left-hand side for this draft. And of note, they do share a color. Reed Duke is blue-white. He's not splashing any colors, and Sam Black ended up being black-white.
Yep. Yeah, I first picked Liliana's Mastery in this draft, so black-white was certainly something I was very looking to get into, and I didn't find a single edge in there.
Yeah, this was an interesting... I can't wait to see the rest of the decks as well, as we see kind of the big picture. And, of course, we'll be working our way through that here. What we've got going right now, by the way, from a structure of the tournament standpoint is we're running 2 matches simultaneously. Then we'll run, and if this one ends and that one's still going, we're going to jump over to them and we'll watch the end of it. We're going to do that again. And then we're going to run single matches for the rest of it. So we make sure to get whatever match ends up being the winning one on camera. So let's see. This looks like turn 2 Top Crop Skirmisher here on the draw from Reed Duke, who's on the bottom part of your screen. And Sam's just going to run out a Cursed Minotaur, but he's got to feel pretty good. He's got a Splendid Agony in his hand. He can pick off, kind of the first half of that Skirmisher and then maybe, put a dent in something else.
Yeah, I like the look of Reed's deck. It was white-blue was sort of a in the testing, nobody was a huge fan of it at first, but when we started getting the data back, it was one of the best performing archetypes. We figured out eventually it was because it was a little underdrafted, and basically anytime anybody was white-blue, they had either the gold uncommon or the gold rare in multiples, like 2 of the uncommon or 1 of the uncommon, 1 of the rare. Somebody would be white or blue, see some of those late, and nobody else could remotely use them, and in that deck, they're just so good. And the deck works when you get all of it, and it uses a bunch of cards nobody else is using at all. So the deck actually performs pretty well.
Yeah, and you can see that Reed has, well, let's just say he has at least the uncommon here with that even wind guide. And, he's attacking with the Top Crop Skirmisher after throwing the compulsory rest on it. Grim Strider here for Sam Black. So he's looking to kind of get that hand emptied out at some point here. For now, it's just going to have to be a Hill Giant. Reed has equipped that Hone Kopesh last turn, which is why Sam's down to 17, and he's going to offer a trade here, and Sam is going to turn that trade down, as you might imagine.
Not the happiest trade when you have to trade off with that guy. That guy stops a lot of good aggro starts, but he beats pretty well, too.
Yeah, especially when he's got that blade in hand. Now it's an Aven Wind Guide, and you can see the synergies in Reed Duke's deck kind of starting to form here. Even if the Top Crop Skirmisher were to die at some point, it would come back thanks to Embalm, and it would even get Vigilance and Flying as a result of the Wind Guide.
Yep. And that compulsory rest wasn't nearly the only one of those I passed to Reed, so...
Yeah, that is true. So were you on Reed's right-hand side then?
I was.
Okay. That's good to know, too, for the people at home.
Sam looks to have his eye on casting Splendid Agony this turn.
By the way,
that's a...
Ooh, yeah, the big Angly. He picked up one of those, too. That was one of the things that actually started to solidify Reed a little bit more towards the blue direction. By the way, I got a question for you from the chat, Justin. You mentioned a minute ago, you said when we started getting back all the data, they want to know from whom? Where are you getting that data from when you guys were doing your testing?
Well, from the draft camps during the release weekend, they're all over the place. There's a big one in Madison. There's a big one in DC. California has more than one. Bay Area for sure. Another one around LA, if not more than one around LA. And so we have access to like some of those more so than others are pretty data driven. The DC one, for example, is very data driven. Chris Massioli, I think, is a big element of that. And they wind up with some very, very, very thorough data that you can get a look at and find out really a lot of stuff pretty quickly.
Sam's striding that fine line there as he's up to 5 cards in hand which makes this Grimstrider just at 1/1. Careful, Sam. He may need to run that supernatural stamina. All right, it looks like he's got a land to play, so it's back up to 2/2. But you did see that he had to cycle away the Wing Shepherd there and find a land. Otherwise, he would have been forced to just play supernatural stamina from his hand for no value there.
Yeah, you can tell at a glance that Sam doesn't exactly have the dream Grimstrider deck with all these, 6 drops, Wander and Dust. He's not well set up to be able to reliably empty his hand quickly.
Yeah, look at his graveyard. Yeah, that's a tough spot to be. And right now he is getting kind of smashed here. Sam had to kind of spin his wheels for a little while, cycling a couple of Wandering Deaths and Wing Shepherd twice. And in the meantime, Reed just kind of went about his work, just curving out a few disruptive elements, the Angler Drake and the compulsory rest, and he has overwhelmed Sam Black there to win game number 1 as the players go to their sideboards.
Yeah, for both players casting spells, that game was non-competitive.
Right. And that is the tough part for Sam, is that, given that he has a relatively low creature count, he is going to have to kind of scrap in the early part. And if Reed is able to keep coming out with that good curve, it's going to make life difficult for Sam Black. Now, if Reed stumbles, Sam seems to have a pretty powerful late game going on. He's got some good removal spells. I see, he's got the Wandering Death, so he can kind of get his grind on. He's even got cards like Unburden. Like you said, a 6-drop there. So I think that he can make that work, but it is going to be tough if Reed continues to kind of curve out on him here.
Yeah, Sam's going to need to slow the game down. He needs to force trades, too, to take advantage of his Wanderer and Death. But that's the problem. That's where Reed's creatures having flashback functionally. Like, if that Tar Crash goes from a different creature, Sam happily trades there, sets up a bigger Wanderer and Death later. But because of what it was, there was no equity there, so he couldn't do it.
So Sam with another slow opener here. He's just drew his first creature. It's a 4-drop, but he does get to use his mana up, at least in the early stages, by getting some cycling going. He's going to start off with Renewed Faith. He's also got an Unburden that he can cycle as he works his way up to that Tawcrop Elite.
Yep.
Ooh, he drew a Baleful Amit for the turn, though. That's a nice rip for Sam. He gets to play, a potent creature here on turn 3 and kind of make Reed react to him.
Yeah, that's a big deal. This 2/4 is going to have something to say about it.
Yeah. I wonder if Sam just goes for the compulsory arrest and, this is interesting.
So really,
now he's got 4 drops he can play, yeah.
Yeah, it's too inefficient a use of mana, and the Elite will get the Amit through too if it attacks. So definitely better to just play a guy there.
Sure. Oketra's Attendant was the draw for Reed. What's his first pick?
He's got good cards and a Zenith Seeker.
Yeah, I was going to say he may be forced to play a not so great card here, but I think he may be considering if he wants to actually attack with those who serve. Because if his play is just going to be Sparring Mummy anyway, he may as well.
Yeah, there's some.
Yeah, he's going to go for the Aven Wind Guide rather than the Sparring Mummy.
Yeah, that makes sense, and no attack there.
Mm-hmm. Ooh, but Sam's going to unburden Reed of a couple of cards here, though.
Pretty aggressive to go for an unburden this early, but he's hitting 2 spells, although, maybe one of them will have Embalm. We'll see.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Sam's still looking to be mana efficient as he can go Swamp and then play Compulsory Rest if he'd like, or cycle Wander in Death. He has 2 different options there, but taking the most mana efficient route here, it looks like.
Yeah, and I'd say this line is pretty suggestive that he's going to go for a rest and attack and try to stay on the front foot. It's a good attack if he exerts.
Now, he's usually incentivized to arrest those who serve here, right, Justin?
Yeah, I would say so. So the flyer has Vigilance. Mm-hmm. Let's see. Reed discarded 2 non-lands. Oh, interesting. Just wait.
This does open
maybe
the
he doesn't
door
spend
for
it at all.
Double block, yeah. Interesting choice from Reed Duke's perspective as well, because Sam does have 2 mana up and can represent any number of tricks like Mighty Leap or Supernatural Stamina.
Yeah, if he's Supernatural Stare, it's really, really, really bad. I think. Oh no, it still only kills 1 guy. It's not that bad.
Yeah, and so Reed says, okay, if you got it, that's fine. The Wind Guide hits the bin, but of course that has Embalm, so you know, that could be back in a turn or two here, depending on the land drops from Reed.
Yeah, I think the thinking for Sam here is what I was sort of saying about the last game that he couldn't do, which is force trades and get into a position where he can leverage his Wander and Death for maximum value.
Yeah, totally. Getting a Baleful Amit into the graveyard's not too bad. And it looks like Reed's going to take the most mana-efficient line as well. He had two reasonable options, the Oketra's Attendant on Embalm, or he could have played the Drake. Here's Grimstrider as a 3/3, and a Cartouche of Ambition drawn for Sam Black. That can certainly help change a race in his favor.
Yep, not a bad draw. I like the cards that Sam has. Let's see if he's able to leverage them effectively.
Yeah, that is the interesting part here, isn't it? Because both players actually have pretty reasonable hands. A lot of threats in hand for Reed, and some answers and ways to kind of pull ahead in the late game for Sam. It kind of depends on how they go about this. It looks like Reed just wants to take to the skies here, cast a Shimmer Scale Drake after the Oketra's Attendant, giving him 7 power in the air. Pretty quick.
Yeah, and he can keep playing
clock here.
He can keep playing flyers for a while too. He's got Zenith Seeker one way or another next turn. As soon as he draws a land, the Even Wind Guide comes out.
Okay, Compulsory Rest is going to hit the Shimmer Scale Drake, and then Sam's going to play the Cartouche of Ambition, and all of a sudden that Grimstrider has gotten out of hand.
Yeah.
Wow.
So now we've got a real plan. Even with a bunch of flyers, Reed's going to have a hard time racing this if he doesn't find an answer.
Yeah, this looks pretty good for Sam. Look at this board state now. He's attacking for 8. 6 of it has lifelink, and he's already hit 21. That's going to put him up to 27. And
ooh. Half an answer.
It's kind of interesting. Yeah, he found a Forsake the Worldly, which can free up his Shimmer Scale Drake or make the Grimstrider a little less lifelinky.
Yeah, he could potentially use that to set up a double block if he wanted to, although that's a little risky.
Yeah, his mana situation's a little bit awkward as well. He really can only play one of these spells this turn.
Yeah, that's a real pain. That's a real pain for him because his spells are also none of them are bad exactly, but they're all slightly underpowered. And the fact that he can only deploy one of them sort of multiplies that, he's getting like 3 mana worth of value on his 5 mana. Yeah. That's not where he wants to be.
Not at all. Well, he's just going to use up 4 of his mana by playing Sparring Mummy and passing the turn back. Sam Black with the second copy of Wander in Death.
Uh-huh.
Well, maybe he just jams that Grimstrider and just says, trade me something for it.
Yeah, I wonder if one of those gets cycled pretty quickly here.
Mm-hmm.
I think if a creature doesn't find its way into the graveyard here, that's what we're going to see.
Yeah, it is kind of interesting about when you cycle that as well, given the Grimstrider, because like if he cycles into a land, he would have preferred to have played that already rather than have it stuck in his hand during combat here. But also he could find something, good.
Yeah, that only matters. You've got to be expecting Reed's going to feel like he has to block here with the life totals the way they are. So sure. Making the Grimstrider 1/1 bigger is only relevant in so much as you think it will affect whatever ends up happening with this multi-block. And I don't know if it did or not.
It did not in this case. And Sam is quite happy, I think, to be able to just get back his Baleful Amit and his Grimstrider with Wander in Death, slam the Amit, and ship it back. This is the plan that you described, Justin. This sort of more attrition-based late game plan, and it looks like it's coming around pretty nicely here for Sam.
Yeah, being on the play was a big deal, and Reed not having to have an answer for that black cartouche. Life totals are now in a position where Sam gets to dictate the pace. Reed doesn't have the luxury of not trading off, and so if the game keeps going at this pace, there'll just be more trades, and then Sam will kill him with the other Wander in Death, if nothing else.
Right. Yeah, Reed finds an island, which is going to get him a chance to play a couple of spells this turn. He can play the Sentinels and keep up Forsake the Worldly.
Yeah, that seems pretty good.
Yeah. That Zenith
a lot better than
only doing one thing. Yeah.
it's not a good card.
It's pretty bad. Well, he did end up using up all of his mana, but he actually just went for the Embalm on Even Wind Guide.
Interesting.
Ooh, look at that. Impeccable timing off the top of the deck for Sam Black. That's a nice rip.
Yeah, it's not huge yet, but that's the kind of thing that, like I said, because of the life total positioning, Sam gets to dictate the pace. Reed's gonna pretty soon, again, I expect, find himself in a position where he has to double or triple block, and that impeccable timing could really make a bad situation worse.
Oh, yeah. Right now, Sam's content to just trade off his Baleful Amit with the Sparring Mummy. Not a trade you'd normally be happy with. And I'm sure some people are saying, well, why didn't he just use the impeccable timing? It's because of that Wandering Death. He's really trying to, craft this entire game around the Wandering Deaths. He had 2 of them in his hand, and that's a lot of value. There's impeccable timing now before the even win guide.
I'm slightly surprised to see him go this aggressive with it. I'm guessing this has a lot to do with mana efficiency. Wandering Death. That Wandering Death costs 3, but it's going to add, 8 more costs to his hand at the same time. So
right.
Doesn't want his mana already accounted for.
Yeah, when you don't have enough creatures, sometimes you have to use the same ones over and over. And that's what Sam's doing very well here. I think we're going to see Reed go for the Forsake the Worldly on that compulsory rest, and then try to go for a block on the Talkrop Elite or a double on the Grimstrider, which looks like a good play from Reed's seat, but the Splendid Agony is kind of a pain.
Yep, Sam drew a backup combat trick, running a little good right now. Yeah, and regarding Wandering Death, that was a card Sam was up on very early in the format. Before, at least around here, at least people had quite figured it out. Sam was like, "Oh, this is top 3 black common, like for sure. Like this is really good. Key to the cycling deck." And
where are you at on it right now?
Oh, similar. He was, it's like 3rd or 4th, I think, of the black commons. It suffers a little bit in its positioning because the deck that it's most key in, which I think is the cycling deck, did not turn out to be a particularly good archetype. It's hard to draft and easy to lose with. You need a lot of things to go right. It has some weaknesses. So because its best home is a little deficient, that holds its pick order down a little bit from what it might be otherwise. But based on just card quality, very good.
All right, well, Reed Duke finds himself way up against it, but rips a nice one to help himself get back out of this mess. He's at 1 life. Sam Black's at 34, but Angler Drake.
That's the kind of thing he needed. He's going to need that, a little bit more like that could turn this around for him.
Well, he's going to go ahead and just attack with the Sentinels and then line up this Angler Drake to return the Grimstrider to hand and leave a blocker for the Talkrop Elite. And so far, Sam doesn't have a way to get through. Cradle of the Accursed is what Sam drew. And, that's just fine here. It's another lethal threat.
Right. It's going to potentially allow him, with Reed at 1, that's the kind of card that's going to potentially allow him to put 2 creatures into play potentially on a later turn when every creature is lethal. Create a spot where Reed just has no outs. Well, he can play 2 creatures here if he wants to. And it looks like he does.
Okay. If we're going to count Zenith Seeker as a creature, I suppose I agree. Poor Zenith Seeker. I'm sorry, Zenith Seeker. But never to return off the top. And I got to say, that's karma there. Reed passed that to him, man.
That's going to be a lot of bad blocks here leading to a next turn loss, I expect.
Yeah, it does seem to be the case, doesn't it? By the way,
Sam gets to play another creature.
Yeah. I have an update on our other match that was going on alongside this, and it's over, by the way. That was Matt Severa defeating William Huey Jensen 2-0. So 1 to Team Madison there, Justin. You got to be happy about that.
Very happy. Matt's great. Such a good player. I basically called his breakout the GP before it started, and he's just had a phenomenal year, and now people know who he is, as they should.
What has he won? Like
really good.
3 GPs in the last years? I mean, the guy's insane.
Yeah, I had a conversation with BDM the week before the first of those, which was Grand Prix DC, which the 2 of us won with Mike Cron. The week before that in Detroit, after bombing out, I had a conversation with BDM about how great Matt was and how ridiculous it was that, more people knew who I was and who he was, since he had always been better than me and still was. And, BDM was kind of a little skeptical, and I'm like, no, I don't know why he hasn't broken out yet, but it should happen any minute. We won the Grand Prix the next weekend, and then he just went on a tear.
Yeah, that's awesome. Could have something to do with that whole, PT deep run thing. All right, so Reed Duke just barely hanging on here. He's in chump block mode on this Grim Strider. He's got to throw something in front of it just at 1 life. He's going to throw
Does he have a double block here?
He kind of does. It's interesting because he has the cycle from the Winged Shepherd, which does make the Heckma Sentinels into a 3/4 and is 5 power, so that will actually get rid of the Grim Strider. Unfortunately for Reed, that second Wander in Death that Sam's been sitting on for a while, that's going to do some pretty serious work here.
Yep.
And like we said before, every threat's lethal at this point.
Yeah, and again, Reed's drawing the kind of cards that he needs. Cheap, like Angler Drake. He's got some cheap removal here, but the hole is just too deep. I think he just has to cycle that.
Yeah, he's going to have to cycle away this Winged Shepherd and hope to hit a creature.
And that will do it.
Yeah, he bricked. So this is going to be Sam Black winning game number 2, which of course means we get a game number 3. Let's take a look at how the players sideboard here.
Did we see any changes coming into the second game? I'll admit I wasn't paying close enough attention.
No, I didn't see either because what Reed does is he moves a bunch of his cards around on the screen, but then I can't ever tell if he's actually taking them out of his deck or
He's
not.
just playing 3-card Monty over there.
Yeah, pretty much. All right, well, he has brought in a card, in fact, that both players share, which is Gideon's Intervention. Now that I guess they know a little more about some of the cards in their deck, they may want to... they have more information about what to name.
You think Reed's thinking about shutting down that all-in Wander in Death plan?
I thought about it, but at the same time, he can still cycle it, right? Like, even if you name it.
No,
So
it's not great.
That was the first thought I had, though, honestly, because, that was the all-star, right? Wander in Death was the MVP of Game 2 for sure. All right, so we're on our way in Game 3. How does this hand look for Sam Black?
It looks like it has more good cards than I knew he had. I like to see Gustwalker in the house.
That's more good cards than I knew he had. You're his teammate, man. You've seen all of this.
I call him like I see him. Yeah, but I try not to look too closely sometimes.
All right, well, it looks like 2-drop versus 2-drop here, and Reed Duke is just going to start slamming with this Skirmisher because he's got a nice follow-up play. He's actually going to play a little bit off-curve here and play a Binding Mummy rather than a Those Who Serve, trying to leverage the triggered ability from Binding Mummy. Smart play there.
Yep, definitely. And, there's not too long that Sam can go without finding a swamp before things are going to get pretty unfortunate for him. He's got a little bit longer.
What do you think about that attack from Sam? He did not exert his Gustwalker. He actually offered the trade for the Binding Mummy.
Yeah, again, we're talking about, there's one in his hand right now, but yeah, he just wants to trade. He wants to trade with anything. I think, I could be wrong, but I think Reed might have also mulliganed this game, which even more so would make an attrition plan even more attractive. Your opponent's already already doesn't have enough cards to work with, so you just trade 1-for-1 as much as you can, and even if your cards are a little better, if you have that Wander in Death in your pocket, it's just fine. Yeah,
that makes a lot of sense. This could get sketchy here for Sam Black. He drew Cast Out, one of his better cards. He seems to have a reasonable game plan with the Wander in Death, the Grim Strider, and the Cast Out in his hand, but he is stuck on 3 lands, and we're going to monitor this development because if he can't find either a 4th land or his black mana, he may be forced to cycle that Cast Out, which is never really in a spot you want to be in.
Yeah, that's a very sad story.
You think he's just going to do it here, or?
Yeah,
no, he did.
No. All right.
See what he found. Okay, he found a 4th Plains, so that's business.
So we have good removal, asterisk removal, and he's thinking whether he wants to keep attacking now at this point.
Can we call it removal?
Yeah.
Like air quotes removal.
Yeah.
Okay, here's Cast Out for Sam. And he's just going to get rid of the Heckma Sentinels and try to make this into a race, I suppose. He can slam for 7 here if he wants, or 5 with no exert and be able to attack next turn. And that's what he's going to do. And both players have Gideon's Intervention in hand, though Reed can't actually cast it. Reed was trying to set up a win here with Inoketra's name and a compulsory rest, both as kind of tempo plays, right? Like compulsory rest, attack you, and maybe finish up the game.
Right, and with Sam's mana pinch the way it is, he's not even necessarily going to be in a position to take the upside on getting pacified and get the 2 life before he's dead.
Exactly. So
and I don't
Reed's
think
just
he's seen Inoketra's name.
Yeah, I don't think so either. Splendid Agony, definitely not what the doctor ordered here for Sam Black. He's going to have to cycle away, wander, and hit a swamp if he can. This is a big chunk of his game plan, hitting the graveyard, not in the fashion he wanted. He found a land, but it was a plains, not a swamp. And this one could be slipping away from Sam.
Yeah, interesting choice to cycle instead of playing the Gideon's Intervention.
Mm-hmm. He could have, blanked one of these 2 threats here.
Yeah, obviously he's thinking to a slightly longer term. He's thinking if he's going to win this game, he's probably going to need to also beat, the flyers that we know are in Reed's deck, which could be lurking in his hand while he's stuck on 4 mana. And he's thinking he'll need the intervention for one of those. And he needs to hit the swamp so that the Splendid Agony or the Dune Beetles can hold off these guys. If you have to intervene on one of those, it might make you lose a little slower, but it might make you more likely to lose over the medium and long term.
Here's another interesting term for Reed Duke. He drew a cycler, Oketra's Attendant, but he's also got Inoketra's name here. It looks like he's going to take the middle ground attack here and just attack with the Skirmisher, which he's willing to trade off for the Walker. He could have got aggressive there and slammed with the Binding Mummy, planning on casting Inoketra's name or trading off for the Talkrop Skirmisher. But in the way that he took it, Sam just took the 2 damage because, well, that doesn't kill him.
Yeah, he's really valuing that. Reed's really valuing that Inoketra's name to not attack with the Binding Mummy there. He really wants to get some more from that.
Mm-hmm. Sam's gonna get rid of that compulsory rest and the Rep Crop Spearmaster in the same turn. And oh no, this is not what Sam wanted to see here. A cheap cycling card would be fine, but not that one.
So now there's nothing to do but play the intervention. He's got 2/2, so the really.
Wow, Sam's attacking here with Gustwalker.
Can't say I could explain this attack.
I'm curious to see what his plan around this is as well. As, like you said, he's going to play the Gideon's Intervention, and he can name a Binding Mummy or a Skirmisher.
Well, he could also name the Giant Flyer that could be cast next turn. But
that's true. That's true.
That would kill him.
That would, in fact, kill him in this scenario. So he may need to use it just to stem the bleeding of the threats that he already knows about. I mean, he knows the Oketra's Attendant can come back, like you said, but he's going to fall to 2 if he names that. Also, what happens with the token? I haven't actually thought of it. It says choose a card name. Does he just have to name whatever the token is? The Oketra's Attendant token is called?
Does it not have the same? It's a copy, so I think it has the same name.
Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah, he'll be able to. So it's not casting, so he will be able to still embalm it. I mean, so he did it, so he's dead, so it's irrelevant. Right. If he was not dead, Reed would still be able to embalm the Oketra's Attendant. I don't believe it prevents that, since it's not casting. Right. But it would be a non-damage dealing blocker.
But as it stands, the way is clear here for Reed Duke to just fire off Inoketra's name and take down the match. So we're tied at 1 match apiece here on our first one, and that's kind of good news for you viewing at home, isn't it? I know that Justin, seeing Reed win that wasn't good news for your team, but I got to say from a viewer perspective, I like it when they're nice and close because we've still got a lot of matches to cover here. We're going to be lining up our next ones here shortly, and I can tell you who's playing if you're curious. It looks like it's going to be Owen Turtenwald versus Matt Severa. That's going to be your main camera match, and then you're going to be playing William Huey Jensen off camera. Godspeed, man. I mean, I guess we just get used to it, right? But it's murderer's row here, man. I mean, there's really no good option.
We did not get a bye in the first round.
That is most definitely correct. What's your confidence level, with the draft in general? You got a chance to build with your teammates. You've seen a little bit about what Reed was up to there. I'm sure you'll get some information about the other decks in the field. What's your general confidence level with this first round here?
Medium plus, I'd say. It wasn't a super high power level draft as you often get with a 6-man, so the decks look a little weak. So there's no need to. Some people would panic at that point because their decks look pretty bad. It's like, well, your opponent's decks might look pretty bad too.
Mm-hmm.
They were working with a lot of the same stuff you were working with. So I feel pretty good. Obviously, there's few people I would less like to be across the table from when playing with anything on the line, but we'll see what we can make happen.
Yeah. William Huey Jensen, obviously the Hall of Famer, and he's one of the best. We don't get him, in things like this that often. It took something like this. I don't think he really plays a whole lot of vintage at this point, though he probably knows all the cards still. It should be great to get a chance to watch him. I wonder who's commentating that actually.
Cool.
It looks like the players that we just watched, which was Sam and Reed,
that makes sense.
Yeah, are going to be doing it. So that's going to be fun too. We're going to get a chance to get their thoughts. They usually do a little decompression as they come in about like, oh, you had this, or I passed you that, and you'll hear them chat perhaps a little bit coming in out of that. So that should be good
cool.
As well. Yeah. Okay, well, that's going to do it for round one. Justin, thanks for joining me in the booth. I had a good time. We'll be back with more after these messages.
Rise